Atomic Habits by James Clear was released in 2018 and recently surpassed 10 million copies sold. My copy only says 1 million copies. Got to get an updated cover on this thing. I don't care who you are. That's a lot of books. That's a lot of people out there that want to make positive change in their life. There's a lot of people out there that want to develop new good habits and break bad ones. But then I have to think about it. With that much influence, with that many copies, that many people that have read this book out there, are there 10 million people out there that are thriving in life, that have made positive change in their life, and we're sort of seeing that in the world and in their life? I'm not sure. I think maybe not. So James actually answers this question in his book as to why things may or may not be working. But before we dive down that rabbit hole, what is an atomic habit? You know, in James's book, right at the beginning, before he dives into the first chapter, he takes the word atomic, something incredibly small, but also immensely powerful. And then a habit, something that you sort of do automatically in a specific situation. And I think it's important to note that any habit can become an atomic habit, something immensely powerful in your life, given the opportunity of time for that habit to compound. Which brings us back to our question: how are there 10 million people out there that are interested in making positive change in their life, but maybe aren't seeing the results or the success or the positive change that they would like in their life? And James addresses this, like I mentioned, and there's two things that I want to draw our attention to today. And the first one is that habits cut both ways. And what I mean by that is that we have to recognize that we all have habits. Some are good, supporting more of our positive future, and some are negative, detracting from the future that maybe we would like to live or we think that we should be headed towards. And the problem is that we don't see the compounding effect of our habits until much later in life. It takes a while for these things to compound. And I think that we're particularly bad at recognizing the negative compounding habits in our life and how impactful they can potentially be. Let's take, for example, maybe you're in a situation where you're currently working in a stressful environment. It could be work, it could be school, or whatever it is, but you tell yourself you've got this stress, you believe it's external, and this stress is going on in your life and you believe it's there for a season, but it shouldn't last very long. Well, let's imagine that that actually isn't the case. And that stressful situation actually ends up going on much longer than you would like. And now you're years into a stressful situation, living in stress, and there's all of a sudden these sort of negative things that are popping up in your life, in your relationships, in your physical health. All of this has sort of happened and compounded over time as we've allowed stress to live in our life. You might have read Atomic Habits and may have put some positive habits in place into your life that are sort of building towards your future. You're learning, you're growing, but you're still living in this sort of stress and it's negatively affecting you. And then all of a sudden it compounds to a point where it becomes an atomic negative habit and you have very difficult health challenges, very broken relationships, or whatever that is. And we haven't picked up on it or been able to recognize that early enough. And that can happen to any one of us. And the second factor is that your habits are a part of you. They make up your identity. They are reinforced daily, weekly, whatever the cadence is, reinforcing what you believe and say about who you are as a person. And so because of that, they're incredibly ingrained in who you are as a person and incredibly difficult to separate and change. James says in his book that, once habits are established, they have a tendency to stick around forever. And he says, especially the bad ones. But thankfully, James does dive into the book a little bit. And how can we make some of these positive changes? And I believe that this is probably the most powerful part of the book where he talks about our identity and what we say to ourselves. Because he says often when we see a negative habit in our life or something that we'd like to end, we try to change it based upon the outcome that we don't like, instead of looking at the core of the person that we want to become, understanding the identity that we want to become, and then speaking into that identity and proving that positive identity to ourselves with small wins. He has this great example of somebody in the book and they are offered a cigarette and one person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." And the other person responds with, "I'm not a smoker." That's a fascinating example. Both of them might have been walking away from cigarettes in their life as a daily habit, but there's a completely different answer. And you're telling yourself something completely different from "I'm trying to quit" to "I'm not a smoker." "I'm not a smoker" is reaffirming that belief of who you are as a person, the person that you're becoming. I know I see this in my own life where I tell myself things like "I'm terrible at remembering names," or "I always hit the snooze button, so maybe I'm not as much of a morning person as I thought that maybe I could be or should be." And I'm sort of defeating myself as I say these things, whereas I need to be speaking over my life that, I love meeting people. I love the opportunity to get to know them and remember who they are as a person, what their dreams and goals are. I want to speak that over my life. I get up early in the morning to support my family and do what it is that I need to do, spend time with God. And I do that because I want that to grow in my life. I need to speak take that over my life and then prove it to myself with small wins. So it's not that I'm just trying to break down a negative habit in my life. I also want to stack the deck to the other side, saying I want to break down this negative habit and reinforce this identity of the person that I believe God is calling me towards, the person that he wants me to become. So what's the surprising truth about Atomic Habits? Because this is a great book, but here's the surprising truth. None of this works unless you do. There are no silver bullets. If you want to make positive change in your life, it is going to take effort, both in identifying the person that you want to become and God is calling you towards, and also identifying the negative things that are not working towards that, not working towards the identity that you believe God is calling you to. It is going to take effort. But the good news is that it is absolutely worth it, because God wants to do incredible things in and through you. I know that in your life, you're already on an incredible trajectory, and there's impact that God wants to have through you.